civilization.
This is our animated map of the Roman Empire.
Okay, I'm Tahtiana. I'll be writing. Writing, the Roman alphabet was and is the modern day alphabet that they use today. And the Etruscans were first to develop it, but the Romans were further to develop the alphabet. There are 23 letters in the Roman alphabet. Some of the letters changed, some of the sounds were lost and gained, and some of the styles were combined into one script, which are upper and lowercase letters. This is the Roman alphabet. As you can see, it has some of the traits from our alphabet. Most symbols are associated with religion and the gods and goddesses or mythology. This is what they've used because they came up with the idea that symbols can represent ideas. Yeah, and these are the symbols that they thought will make it. Okay, this is a video of a boy in ancient Rome, how it would be like for education back then.
The ruler had worked. It had protected him. Unlike many others, he had survived to become an adult. At 17, Lucius has almost completed his education. He has learned to speak well, make public speeches, and how to read and write both Latin and Greek. His father has taught him the types of things you can't learn in the classroom. How to run, how to swim, and how to fight. Lucius could choose at 17 to become a military tribune and command soldiers on the edge of the empire. But in other ways, Lucius is still a child. He's not trusted to arrange business deals.
Alright, this is the historical facts from them. Education was very important to the ancient Romans. In ancient Rome, the rich would put a great deal of faith inside of education. The poor didn't get a formal education, but they still learned how to read and write. The rich would get formally taught at home or by a tutor or at school, but this was mainly for the boys. Girls rarely went to school, but they're allowed to get married at the age of 12, but boys were allowed at the age of 14. Girls did go to school, but they learned from home. They learned how to cook, clean, and become a perfect housewife. And some of the education things that they learned was how to do music and how to run a kitchen and something, hold on, and how to do sewing. And once boys were 11 or 12, they had learned everything that they could have learned in school. So most of them stopped going, but the other ones that went to advanced on went to high school. But the advanced school is what they will learn how to do public speaking and how to learn in how to study Syria. Yeah, that. The boys didn't learn how to do physical education, they didn't learn science, and they didn't learn art. So,
Okay, I'm Sarah, and I will be talking to you guys about the Roman climate. In different parts of Rome, they had different weather conditions, and their climate zone is subtropical and Mediterranean. The cold seasons last from November 19th to March 9th with an average temperature of 61 degrees. And the coldest day of the year is February 25th with an average temperature of 36 degrees with a high of 55 degrees. The warmest season would last from June 12th to September 10th with an average temperature above 82 degrees. And the hottest day of the year is July 25th with an average temperature of 89 degrees and a low temperature of 67 degrees. And then from 80 to 50 to 550, the climate has flipped between dry to cool and warm to wet. And the weather in Rome had a really big impact on agriculture. It was generally cooler in ancient Rome than it is now, and the cold weather meant that it's really hard to farm.
So I'm Noah, and I had the pleasure of doing geography. So they had one main river that they didn't really use. It was called the Timber River. So they used aqueducts. So basically aqueducts were they were these man-made stone structures, and they were tilted at an angle so that they could travel for many miles. And so with the invention of the aqueducts, people were now able to use Roman baths, which were a public place where Romans would bathe. And then it says the 7 hills of Rome. The 7 hills of Rome are basically what Rome was built on, right? The 7 hills.
All right, I'm Tad. This is religion. Romans believed in polytheistic for a while. They had several gods. Most of our planets came from the Roman gods. Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and Cupid, all you know, god of love. The polytheistic changed when the emperors thought that they were almighty power and thought that they could rule everybody. But they changed to Christianity when the Christians ruled over the Roman emperors.
I'm Dyjanae, and I have government, and the Roman government was ruled by a monarch, but which was overthrown and it became a republic soon. And they balanced their power between branches, which we know today as the legislative, executive, and judicial branch. And Julius Caesar is the most famous Roman dictator. He led an expedition into Germany and Britain. However, his enemies never stopped plotting against him, and eventually he was killed by Brutus when he was giving a speech about why one man should govern Rome. That is Julius Caesar, and that is their government system. The Roman military was reorganized periodically throughout its existences to stay one step ahead of its opponents, but just as often for getting caught up a step. Regardless, they adjusted to new threats fast, becoming good enough in areas where they struggled to wear down their enemies. This is a picture of the Roman military and their government. I'm going to play a video, and it talks about their laws in 12 seconds.
Teacher says our 12 tables of law are one of the greatest Roman accomplishments. This afternoon, we learned how they came about. Way back in the early days, the patricians were in charge of the laws. They weren't written down, and a lot of things were decided in secret. Not only that, but many legal decisions seemed very unfair to the plebeians. So they insisted that the patricians and the plebeians decide the laws together and write them down publicly for everyone to see. Then the patricians just couldn't change the laws whenever they felt like it, and the criminals couldn't claim they didn't know they were breaking the law. Grandfather says the 12 tables made things clear for everybody.
Okay, the 12 tables were a list of laws that are similar to today's 10 amendments. that when a person is accused of something, both accused and accuser must be present at a hearing or trial on the matter. Also, if both parties don't show up for a court hearing, the judge is free to rule in favor of the party that did show up. Number 3, it gives debtors 30 days to pay off any debt. After that, a credit fee is to seize the debtor and make him or her a prisoner. Number 6 is coming into grasp and owning acquisition and possession. And number 12 is if a slave shall have committed theft or done damage with his master's knowledge, the action for damages is in the slave's name. And that is a picture of the 12 tables.
So I have economy, and basically the Romans' economy, they used agriculture, but they don't use it how we use it. It wasn't very important to them to use farming, but they did farm. So the rich would often go and buy land that was unused, and they would start making farms. And so they didn't have anybody to work with them, so they would force the poor to go and work for them. And when they went to go work on a farm, it wasn't very good treatment. So.
Okay, so I had culture along with Tad, and for the artistic expression, I chose the Roman Colosseum, and it was built around 70 AD, and the ancient Romans would sometimes go to the Colosseum and they would have a game of miniature ship naval battles. It's also a standing iconic symbol of ancient Rome, and the monument that once held the inhuman games, Man versus Beast. Today, 2/3 of the Colosseum is destroyed from when it was built. I also had fashion, and men wore togas and tunics. Togas were loose flowing garments that were only made out of a single piece of fabric, and it covered the whole body but the right arm. And a tunic was a loose flowing garment that was made short sleeved, and it reached the person wearing its knees. And women wore tunics and stolas, and they often wore palas. Stolas typically were made from 2 rectangular parts of cloth joined at the sides by buttons. It also allowed the garment to flow freely over the front of the person who was wearing it. And a pala is often known as cloaks, and they also wore gladiator sandals. And then I also,
Their activities and recreation, the Romans loved to ride horses. They loved to wrestle and box just like us boys do today. In their school, they actually had wrestling just like we do. They used to run a lot. In the Colosseum, they had all kinds of Olympic games, and they just did a lot of extra stuff like hunting, fishing, biking, playing ball games, just a lot of fun. The food that they ate, the poor Romans were forced to eat like cereal grain and like bread, just nothing much. They didn't get to eat very much. While the rich would actually have banquets every night, and they would invite lots of people in that were in middle class, as we would call it today. Very few poor people got into these banquets unless they felt that their heart needed it. A lot of people actually died because they were trying to get into the banquet, and the rich people would have to kill them.
okay, so I had the written expression, which I chose poetry. And the Romans actually took poetry and they recreated it into a different thing from the Greeks. They continued it. And Roman poets used poetry to express their feelings, and they had to do tellings and retellings of the historical epics, especially in the early times of Rome. And Roman poetry used the style that the Greeks did, however, they suppressed the style.
Okay, I hope you guys were paying attention. Now, we passed out paper before we started, and you have a minute to answer all 5 questions, and the first, well, 4 of these questions, then the first people to get it will get a treat.
Boy, that's not fair. See the answers right here.
Okay, don't look at them.
So I know they see it.
There, go.
They on the minute.
You got a minute, go.
Where?
And the winner gets to come up here and choose their treat. You just have to show us your questions and answers. Ryan, get out of the way.
Like you're actually going to
All those see it.
Twenty seconds.
I'm coming.
Go get Sean, go. Go get Sean, go.
Throw your pants up, guy. Throw your pants up, guy.
That's not fair. Jada up here.
Right, Jada's up there. I'm all the way in the back.
You gonna hit me?
I got 3.
Y'all are arguing.
Mario, give me 1. Everybody gets a treat.
Yeah, everybody gets a treat.
Yeah! I get a cookie.
Out there, too. How about that dog rock?
Please, come here, be on.
I have to lift over your chair.
I leap over my chair. Get Sean. Give me one. Give me one.
Have one.
Give me one.
Yes,
I'm going to
Oh my God, you did
Hey, did you give me more Tahtiana?
We'll see.
I was moving. Where's that going?
Sarah, let me get 1.
No.
Hold on. You're eating one. You guys. Oh, give him a hand.